perhaps this is not what the prevailing notion was even 24 hours ago, as everyone looked to a swing state, which Minnesota is not. It is safely blue. And yet what we have seen today is Democrats of all shapes and sizes, be it AOC or Joe Manchin, have seemed to come out in favor of Governor Walz.
That's right. I think you hit on a couple of key things there, Kailey. One is that it's solidly blue, but it's also in the blue wall. That is very important to Democrats in terms of those Midwestern states. So he does pick up some of that vibe, for lack of a better word. But potentially the bigger factor was the fact that he's able to unite a lot of different types of the Democratic base. As you said, Manchin came out more of a centrist, AOC more of a progressive. We saw labor leaders like Schuler come out. So I think that was one of the things. And lastly, I'll just note that our reporting has shown over the past couple of weeks that Harris was saying over and over that she wanted a connection with someone as well. And it does seem like there started to be this connection building between the two of them.
Jonathan, it's an interesting moment here for the campaign, an interesting one for Josh Shapiro as well. He issued a statement. A lot of folks woke up this morning thinking that he would be the pick for some of the obvious reasons, included that Kailey refers to as the governor of the most important state, probably in the Democratic map here. He said that this decision was incredibly personal for Kamala Harris and that it was for him, too, as if it was a shared decision. Are we to believe that?
No, I mean, I think he might say, look, he's got to run for governor again. So I think he might want to leave open this possibility that he was torn about whether he wanted to become vice president or not. He was clearly gunning hard for the job. His campaign schedule made it clear for that. But he had said all along it was personal, and I think he's trying to say, listen, this is not a knock on my political skills. This is a connection that she happened to have with the governor. Whether that's true or not, I think that's what he wants to tell people.
Well, in a fundraising email just hitting from Governor Shapiro, my work here in Pennsylvania is far from finished, so perhaps going back to just governing his state. When we think about governing, though, we have already seen Republicans attacking, as we heard from J.D. Vance there, this idea that Governor Walz is a dangerous liberal or a radical leftist, some of the kind of language we are hearing. When we actually look at his record, though, both as governor and as a member of the House of Representatives for 12 years, what is his record, actually? Is he as left as he's being made out to be?
So it's interesting because as a House member, he represented a pretty rural district that was shifting right, as he represented it. And he voted with his party most of the time, but he certainly compromised on a number of issues. He was, at that time, against gun restrictions. He worked on bipartisan farm bills. He was a big advocate for agriculture. So he had more of a moderate profile as a House member. As a governor of more of a blue state, he took on some more progressive issues, things like abortion, child tax credit. And so I think you're going to see both sides of that coming out in this campaign. Democrats, I think, will more emphasize the more moderate aspects of his record because, as we spoke about already, they want him to appeal to those swing states.
We're already hearing about fundraising, which is fascinating. Since Governor Walz was announced, the Harris-Walz team has raised more than $10 million. They qualify as coming from grassroots supporters alone. Does this help to keep the so-called honeymoon alive here? It's been a very lucrative couple of weeks for Kamala Harris.
It has, Joe. It's one of the things that I think has been so dramatic to see change. Going into the beginning of this year, Biden's one key advantage was that he had more money than Trump. Then we saw, after some of Trump's legal battles, he came back surging in, and then Biden's age became such this big issue. And now we're seeing Harris kind of surge again in terms of money on the campaign trail, which could be critical when it comes down to October and those last few weeks with ads and things like that. She's also getting more earned media for free, which has been for a long time one of Trump's advantages. I think the caveat to the honeymoon is the economy. I mean, we're seeing the markets right now have quite a wild ride to the downside over the last week or so. The jobs numbers on Friday were not as good as people expected. So I think that is the one caveat to the honeymoon right now, is if the economy turns, it will be difficult for them to sharpen that economic message, which is what Harris is hoping Walz can help her do.
Yeah, timing could be everything. When we think about messaging, though, when it comes to Governor Walz, I was taken by a new Marist poll that just came out this afternoon. We should, with a caveat, say it was conducted up to August 4th, so this was before he was actually selected to be her running mate. But they find, while he's viewed positively of 17% of U.S. residents, 12% are unfavorable, 71% have either never heard of Walz or are unsure how to rate him. Peggy, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it leaves him some room for creating his own message, I guess. But I would say that a couple of things. I think we've seen a lot of the public opinion polls change on Harris just even the last few weeks. So I think he has a window, and they don't have much time with less than 100 days to the election to explain to the American people who he is and how and why he'd be a good vice president. We'll just see if it resonates quickly enough.
We've got an eye on this event at Temple University. 10,000 people expected to pack this hall if they fill it. That's pretty impressive stuff, Jonathan. Senator Bob Casey is speaking now. Senator John Fetterman on the stage. The aforementioned Josh Shapiro will be there as they try to bring this image of unity. What does Tim Walz himself have to say that's going to matter in Pennsylvania?
Well, I think they're going to ask him to kind of be that everyman character for their campaign. You know, Governor Shapiro has had a lot of success in Pennsylvania, but he's not someone you would describe as an everyman. He's a clear striver, ambitious politician. I think they're going to have Walz. You saw that image of him in the camouflage hat and the khakis. I think, you know, they need Philadelphia. I think Walz is going to be their weapon out in kind of some of the more rural parts of the state that don't necessarily lean Democratic. That might gravitate towards somebody with that kind of image.
But does having Walz at the top of the ticket, or I guess second on the ticket, relative to a Shapiro, have less of an effect on someone who's in a vulnerable position, like Senator Bob Casey, who is speaking now? He's one of those seats that we're watching down the ballot.
I think Pennsylvania Democrats in tough races wanted Shapiro. He's won 3 times in that state. There are millions of voters in Pennsylvania who are comfortable pulling a lever for Shapiro. So I think in Pennsylvania specifically, Shapiro would have improved Democratic chances. Harris obviously has made a calculation, whether it's a political calculation or a personal calculation, that Walz maybe helps her more in other places, or maybe she just has that better personal link up with him.